Hi guys, I have another art journaling process for you, but first I wanted to show you some project that I made with my new gouache paints, and this is the first thing that I did with them, the first two slides, and now I'm just going to show you a few other projects. So I played around with these. I have a video showing you exactly what paints I have in my palette. It's a combination of Shinhan Pass hybrid paint and Winsor Newton and Schmincke gouache. So now I'll just show you the process from start to finish of another spread in my art journal that I made using this palette. I'm working in my Jane Davenport journal. This is the large one. It's fantastic. I am completely in love with it. I've never gone through an art journal so fast as I have with this one, and since I'm in Europe, these are not available to me so easily, but I'll have to figure out a way to get like two more at least or something, because I just love them. So I really have to say that something clicked for me in a good way with these gouache paints. So gouache are mostly considered to be opaque watercolors, but they're not all opaque. So it depends on the particular color that you get. And you'll see as I use these, some are more transparent and some are more opaque. So I'm just starting with laying down some color. And what can I say? This was such a pleasure to create and was just so much fun. I really, really love the ease of using paints that, re-wet as opposed to acrylic. So once acrylic is dry, you're done with it. And of course, that has its advantages. Also in art journaling, it's quite, I think, a learning process to create art journal spreads with something like gouache or watercolors and keep adding layers, because at some point you have to know when to stop. You know, with acrylics, if you're using opaque paints, you can just cover up stuff. Here it's a little bit more challenging, and at some point, because some of them are transparent, things start to look overworked, to me at least, or start to get kind of muddy. And yeah, so it's good and bad. It's good for me because I think it makes me kind of stop and call it done at some point. Because with art journaling, you can just keep adding and adding more layers and more layers. But because of the nature of these paints, I think, yeah, at some point I really feel, okay, this is enough already. And for me, for example, at this stage, that kind of, I don't know, very simplified flower thing I have going on there got too overworked. And it's kind of hard to go back. I mean, you can cover stuff with white paint, and I do that at some point, but not really to cover up, but to blend a few elements that I will add. So it's kind of a learning process for me, and I do like the combination of adding paint here, because it creates this interesting texture, and the gouache paints behave differently on white paint than they do on this watercolor paper. This journal from Jane Davenport has lovely watercolor paper in it. And as you can see, it does buckle, but that's really the nature of this paper. I think with time, as it sits, closed in the journal, you can put something heavy on it, it will flatten out a bit. But I haven't yet found watercolor paper in this weight that will not buckle. So that's just, something you have to accept if you want to work in a journal. If you want to work on, sheets of watercolor paper, then you can buy the thicker stuff and yeah, try that. But yeah, it does buckle a little bit when you use a lot of water. So at this point I thought, okay, I want to add something here. So I'm going through my Daphne's Diary magazine and just picking out some images. I end up mostly using this part of this beautiful print now, that the one I'm cutting into now. And I do feel I'm kind of fussy cutting here, but I prefer to have the edges torn. It just looks a little bit better, and when you glue it down, it looks like a part of the layout more if the edges are torn. That's how I feel, you know, as opposed to just something you glued on top of your page. So that cute girl, I'm not going to use her on this one, although I thought she was really whimsical and cute. Maybe on another layout some other day. And for this one, I'm just going to add a few of these pieces of pattern. It's really gorgeous, beautiful illustrations, kind of some sort of collage with watercolor elements. Very pretty. The colors work well, and I just like how that looks. So I'm ripping a few pieces and I'm using a glue stick to adhere them. I really like using a glue stick to do that. It's easier than liquid glue because you really have to cover the entire surface of the paper, and you know, you have to use a lot of liquid glue if that's what you use, and then usually it warps all the papers, like both the art journal paper and whatever you're adding on top of it. It can warp those too. Of course, you can use something like matte medium, but then you also have to wait for it to dry. So I found that the glue stick works really well. Having said that, I did notice that after I added a lot of other layers and water to this layout, some edges kind of separated. So I guess I didn't glue it as well as I should have. Anyway, just adding some more pieces here and where I think it's needed. And the next step will be to add some paint, just to blend these pieces, because now they look very much like I stuck a piece on this background and I want to blend them. So there are a few ways of doing that. I think the easiest, I tried here a bit with the white gouache, but it's not the most, well, it is quite opaque, but I just thought using paint would be easier. It's also cheaper because white paint is, you know, if you can get it in like large tubes or tubs, and it's pretty economical. So I grabbed my shimmers, acrytones in white, and this is an acrylic paint with a matte finish, and I really like that. It is, however, not very, very opaque. So you could probably use like heavy gesso to do this, or just acrylic paint, like white acrylic paint, regular one, whichever brand you have. The nice thing about gesso and this paint that I'm using here is that they have, gesso really usually has some tooth in it, and it's more matte usually, and acrylic paint, unless it specifically says matte finish, tends to be more glossy or semi-glossy. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind, and they both behave differently when you add stuff on top of them. So gesso tends to be a little bit more absorbent than acrylic paint. It all there's no right or wrong. It just depends on the look you want, the supplies you have, and what you want to add on top of it. So I'm just adding a few scribbles, kind of pulling out the shapes of those butterflies, and you know, just doodling here and there. I really like the repetition of these lines. It makes it look more doodly, if that's a word. And this is a waterproof pen, so I know that once it's dry, I can add whatever I want on top of it and it's not going to smear. So just make sure you know which type of ink you have in your pen so you won't be disappointed. I like sometimes to use ink that is not waterproof because that also gives a fun look. But yeah, just be aware that you know what you're using. So my paint is dry. Another nice thing about this particular Shimmers paint is that it dries super fast. And now I'm just going to add another layer of gouache. And I'm kind of going to switch up the colors as I go. I just can't tell you how much fun this was. I love also art journaling with acrylic paint, but I don't like, squeezing out a bunch of paints that I may use, and then when they're dry, they're wasted. And with acrylics, I have to kind of just squeeze one at a time of whichever color I want at that point, and it's just less convenient to really explore paint for me. And also the variety that I have with these paints, if I use them if they're like thicker, then the color is more intense and more opaque, and then if I add water, they really flow and become transparent like watercolors. So all these things together, I really, really love working with these. But as I said, it's definitely a learning curve, and at some point things can turn muddy or overworked. I try to avoid that by using just two sides of my palette. So mostly here I used only the like oranges and reds, and then pinks and violets with just a touch of purple, just to avoid muddy colors. I like muddy colors sometimes, but it's just you have to be a bit more careful. And now I did add, for just a little bit of contrast, I mixed some teal and green with white and just added that around those butterflies at the bottom. And here, for example, I'm adding, I think it's some green with white, and it's on top of pink. So it has the potential of turning a little bit muddy. So I definitely, while I continue to explore these paints and make more layouts in my art journal, I have to be mindful of that and kind of know when to stop and know how much I can work and add layers and still make it look the way I want to without having it look overworked. So at this point, I have my main shapes and I have my main elements here. And now it's about adding some contrast in certain spots. So here I'm just going around with another layer of the paints I use to make this flower shape. So I'm just adding another layer, and this will give it some more depth and interest. And yeah, I'm not sure what else I can tell you. I will put links to all the supplies I used in the description box. Some of them are affiliate links, so if you use the link, I get a very small commission. You, of course, don't have to pay more. So it's a win-win situation because you get a fast link. And now I'm using a color that I mixed. I added some white to, I think, was it orange or one of the skin tones I have, and kind of blurred out the area around that little scallop thing that I drew, adding also splatters as I go along. And yeah, it's really hard to stop, it's really hard to say this is finished, but there's always the next page. And I'm so excited about this journal. It's, really filling up, and it's just such a colorful, happy journal. I will definitely show you. I'll do a flip through when I'm done or almost done. Some pages are, more finished than others. Some I could go back and add stuff. But I think that's the nice thing about a journal. And it's okay to leave some things unfinished and, decide later if you want to go back to it or not. It's definitely inspiring and just fun to look at. It's another nice thing about art journals, as opposed to, I don't know, like separate sheets of watercolors or like a canvas or something. You can really sit and flip through it and see how you developed and what you tried and how your style changed or what you were into at that time. So I do think I should start adding the date to my layouts. I'll definitely keep that in mind because it's nice to have that, especially in the future. And as you have more and more art journals, it's nice to see when each one was created. So again, going over some shapes here, adding some definition to certain areas, adding shadows, just playing around, seeing what needs more work, what needs more contrast, and always adding splatters. Why not? The brush I'm using now is, I think it's actually a travel brush. I think it's a number 8 round. Round brushes are really my go-to brushes. I like the amount of water that they hold, and they hold quite a lot, so more than a flat brush. And you can use the side of the brush, you can use the tip of the brush, so they are quite versatile, and I just feel the most comfortable playing with them. And yeah, you can visit my blog. Sorry, I made this long because I didn't want to make it like super fast, so you could follow and see what I'm doing and how I'm adding the layers here. So it's a bit long than my usual videos, and I'm not used to talking so much. But yeah, so I have a video showing how I set up this palette with all the colors, and also a blog post, which there will be a link in the description box. I also have on my blog, I recently posted a custom watercolor palette that I assembled from some of my favorite paints. So you can see that. But right now, yeah, I'm really into these gouache and pass hybrid paints. So this is the finished one. I just added a few white scribbles with the Uniball gel pen. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment if you have any questions. Bye.